Just slip into the featherweight headphones, pop in your favorite cassette, and you'll not only hear the music, you'll feel it all over.
This is my new Chevy Wagon with flip-down seats. The 74 Caprice Estate.
If your living room smelled like shag carpet and melted plastic, and your mom's favorite chair was covered in squeaky vinyl, welcome home. The 70s weren't just a decade, they were a vibe. A strange, warm, avocado-colored vibe. And if you grew up in that era, these 25 things probably lived in your house, your hands, or your heart, until they quietly disappeared. You couldn't ride in the back of a station wagon without fighting over who got the way back. That final row, facing the wrong direction, feet up against the glass, waving at confused drivers behind you. The wood paneling looked classy for about a week before it started peeling. But it didn't matter. Those wagons were playgrounds on wheels, and they carried us everywhere. Summer road trips, baseball practice, or just tagging along with Mom to the grocery store. There was something cinematic about riding backward, watching the world disappear instead of approach. The windows fogged up from laughter, and every bump in the road felt bigger when you weren't sure what was coming next. Seat belts? Optional? Elbows? Flying. And the joy of piling 7 cousins into a 5-seat car and somehow making it work, that was pure 70s magic. The creak of the tailgate, the hum of the wheels, the stale air and vinyl scent, that's not a car ride. That's a core memory. You didn't care how loud it rattled or how hot the seatbelt buckles got. That wagon was freedom. And freedom, back then, came with wood panels, sticky windows, and at least one sibling trying to elbow you out of the good seat. And when you finally stumbled out of the wagon and ran inside, your feet landed on a sea of shag carpeting. Thick, plush, wild, and nearly impossible to vacuum. Shag wasn't just a floor covering, it was a lifestyle. Gold, avocado, burnt orange, colors that shouldn't have worked together but did, because back then, subtle wasn't even in the vocabulary. This wasn't carpet. This was terrain. It swallowed toys, trapped secrets, and somehow, always, felt warm under your toes. You could run your fingers through it like grass, lie face down watching Saturday morning cartoons, and come away with fibers stuck to your cheeks like nature's confetti. And it wasn't just in the living room. It crept up the stairs. It covered entire hallways. Some homes even had it in the bathroom. A bold, bizarre decision that now lives in interior design infamy. But in the 1970s, it made sense. Comfort was king, and nothing felt more decadent than sinking ankle-deep into a fuzzy floor. Cleaning it? Good luck. You could vacuum for hours and still feel crumbs from last Christmas. But no one complained. Because if your feet weren't brushing against shag, were you even home? Of course, when night fell and the house finally quieted, your eyes would lock onto the hypnotic glow of a lava lamp bubbling quietly in the corner. These weren't just lights. They were living, breathing blobs of mystery that danced and swirled in slow motion like alien plasma. You didn't just look at a lava lamp. You zoned out to it. Hours passed, homework forgotten. Minds drifted into daydreams as pinks turned to purples and blobs stretched, twisted, then melted back into themselves. They lived in bedrooms, basements, and rec rooms, each one a quiet companion to bored kids and introspective teens. No one knew how they worked. No one asked. You just knew you had to let it warm up, and once it started moving, the world faded away. It was mood lighting before that was a thing, therapy in a bulb, and for some of us, the closest thing we ever got to meditation. You can keep your LED strips. Give us one glass tower of glowing goo and a beanbag chair, and we're good for the night. And if you wanted music to match the mood, you slid in a chunky 8-track tape. That unmistakable clunk as it locked into place meant you were about to hear magic. You couldn't skip tracks. You couldn't rewind. You just listened, from start to finish, whether you liked the song or not. And that click in the middle of a song? Iconic. It was the soundtrack of road trips, house cleaning, and backyard. cookouts. 8 tracks weren't convenient, but they had soul. You'd stack them up in the glove box or a crate beside the stereo, half of them unlabeled, others with smeared handwriting like Disco Mix or Dad's Tunes. Every house had a few. Every car had that weird slide-in player bolted under the dash. And every kid grew up knowing how to pull it out and blow dust off the edge before shoving it back in with hope and just a bit of force. It wasn't polished, it wasn't perfect, but when that tape hit just right and the player didn't eat, it was magic. Now, if your dad was really serious about sound, you might have had a reel-to-reel tape recorder. This thing looked like it belonged at NASA or in a Cold War spy movie. 2 spinning wheels, miles of brown tape, glowing buttons, and that mesmerizing hum. It was less music player and more sacred ritual. You weren't allowed near it. Maybe, just maybe, you could stand close and watch as the reels spun hypnotically. Dad would carefully thread the tape, push a few buttons, and sit back like a pilot initiating takeoff. The sound was crisp, clean, real, like the band was in the room. The reels would slowly unwind, spilling song after song as the machine clicked and whirred. If it jammed, there'd be a panic. If the tape snapped, it was like someone slashed a painting. You didn't fix it. You mourned it. But when it worked? Oh, when it worked, it was music in its purest form. Warm, full, alive. The kind of sound that made you stop talking and just listen. There was a whole ceremony to using a rotary dial phone. First, you had to find it, usually mounted on the kitchen wall, with a 10-foot cord stretched halfway into the living room. Then came the dialing itself. Pick up the heavy receiver, listen for the dial tone. Yes, that was a thing. And slowly rotate the dial for each number. If you messed up, even once, back to square one. That circular dance wasn't just tactile, it was personal. The rhythm of each call had a vibe. Fast for friends, slow and hesitant for the school principal. And while the numbers clicked back into place, you had time to think, to hesitate, to rehearse. Unlike today's instant messaging, this was communication with weight. And don't forget the cord. Always tangled. You'd wrap it around your finger, stretch it into the hallway for a sliver of privacy, or yank it when someone tripped over it. Phones weren't mobile, but the chaos sure was, and when someone hung up in frustration, that slam of the receiver into its cradle echoed like thunder through the house. When reality got boring, you reached for your Viewmaster, a chunky, red binocular device that could teleport you across the globe or into a Saturday morning cartoon in seconds. You'd slot in the cardboard reel, peer through the lenses, and click. Suddenly, you weren't sitting on your shag carpet. You were on a Disney jungle cruise or exploring outer space. The images were crisp, glowing, and weirdly 3D. And that tiny plastic wheel with the thumb switch, it felt like holding a time machine. Reels came in packs, cartoons, nature, landmarks, fairy tales. Some were exciting, others educational, but all of them had one thing in common: magic. You never viewed just one. It was a whole stack, clicking from one dimension to the next like flipping TV channels with your fingers. And when one reel was done, you flipped it over and started again, until the light changed or your sibling demanded a turn or dinner. Called. But even then, the Viewmaster waited, always ready to escape the real world, one image at a time. You weren't truly ready for school without your metal lunchbox, decorated in cartoon glory and dented from one too many backpack drops. It clanged when it hit the floor, it reeked of last week's tuna, and it was glorious. Inside was a treasure, a matching thermos that doubled as a cup, a folded paper towel your mom used instead of a napkin, and a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Sometimes the thermos leaked. Sometimes it smelled weird. But it always made the whole lunch feel like an event. Those boxes told the world who you were. Scooby-Doo kid, a Star Wars fan, or Brady Bunch loyalist. They weren't just for food, they held crayons, stickers, secrets, and yes, sometimes a bruised banana no one ever ate. And when lunch was over, you'd snap it shut and carry it like a badge of honor. Scratches, stickers, mystery smells, each one earned through experience. Today's lunch bags don't clatter, don't clang, and definitely don't feel like a miniature suitcase packed with personality. Only the 70s could make a cultural phenomenon out of a pet rock. A literal rock sold in a box with holes, straw bedding, and an instruction manual. And millions of us bought them. No feeding, no walks, no vet bills, just companionship in its simplest form. Kids would decorate them with googly eyes, give them names, and even bring them to school. It was the original low-maintenance pet. And surprisingly, one of the most talked-about toys of the decade. Owning a pet rock said something, that you had a sense of humor, that you were in on the joke, and maybe that your parents didn't want to deal with the mess of a hamster. And somehow, despite the absurdity, they worked. They sat on bookshelves, windowsills, and classroom desks, quiet, loyal, and unbothered. Proof that in the 1970s, marketing could turn literally anything into a phenomenon. Nothing said rebellion like flopping into a bean-bag chair and refusing to get up. These blobs of vinyl and stuffing weren't really chairs. They were commitment. Once you sat down, you were in it for the long haul. They came in psychedelic colors and made sounds like a balloon slowly deflating. If the vinyl tore, little pellets spilled everywhere, like confetti from a party you didn't mean to throw. And yet, every kid wanted one, because no adult looked dignified trying to get out of one. Beanbag chairs weren't about posture. They were about vibe. You could sprawl, roll, twist, or bury yourself entirely. Perfect for watching cartoons, playing Atari, or just sulking about your chores. And if you had two, game on. Beanbag battles, launch zones, fort walls. They weren't just furniture. They were play. And as soon as one flattened out from too much love, you begged your parents for another. Because comfort this chaotic couldn't be found in anything with legs. Walk into any 1970s living room and look up. Odds are you'd spot a macrame plant hanger, swaying in the corner like a homemade jungle trap. These weren't just decoration. They were proof that your mom had taste, time, and a stack of Reader's Digest patterns. Knotted with care and dangling from ceiling hooks, they held ferns, spider plants, and sometimes entire terrariums. The yarn was often tan, maybe mustard yellow or even rust orange, always matching the drapes or that oversized owl wall art. Some had beads. Some had fringes. Some were so elaborate they looked like fishing nets on vacation. But they all had that handmade feel, even if they were store-bought, and they screamed peace, love, and slightly overwatered greenery. Macrame didn't stop at plants either. Shelves, curtain ties, wall hangings, there was no limit. And while today's versions lean boho chic, back then they just said, this room needed a vibe. If you ever stood up and felt your skin peel away from the furniture, congratulations. You've survived the plastic couch cover era. These vinyl shields were meant to protect your grandma's good couch from wear and tear. What they actually did was turn your living room into a sweaty greenhouse. They squeaked when you shifted. They crinkled when you sat. And in the summer? Forget it. One wrong move and you were branded like cattle. But they stayed, because those couches were sacred. Floral, tufted, and often untouched by bare human skin thanks to these shiny, heat-trapping barriers. You'd dare your cousin to jump on one and slide. You'd giggle when your legs stuck. And, every once in a while, someone would try to take them off, only to be met with scandalized gasps from the older generation. Protect the couch at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing comfort, dignity, and the back of your thighs. Dinner in the 1970s could be a full-on event thanks to the magical, mystical Fondue set. A big, bubbling pot of cheese, or sometimes chocolate, took center stage, with guests skewering chunks of bread, fruit, or mystery meat and dunking them like it was some kind of culinary baptism. These sets were proudly displayed in their original boxes, gifted at weddings, or passed down like sacred relics. They came with color-coded forks, a little stand with a flame, and a guarantee that someone would either double dip or drop something into the pot and fish for it like a gold miner. Fondue wasn't just a meal, it was an experience. Slow, interactive, and slightly dangerous. There was an art to twirling the cheese just right, and a strategy for not burning your tongue. And if you were really fancy, you had more than one set. Cheese for starters, chocolate for dessert. These days, we microwave and dash. But back then, fondue brought people together, one gooey bite at a time. Only the 70s would hand kids 2 rock-hard acrylic balls on a string and say, "Go have fun." Click, clack balls. Also known as clackers, were noisy, dangerous, and completely irresistible. You'd hold the middle string and whip the balls up and down, trying to get them to hit each other above and below your hand. When it worked, it made a satisfying clack, clack, clack rhythm. When it didn't, it made contact with your wrist, your eye, or whatever unlucky part of your body got in the way. Kids wore bruises like medals of honor. Schools banned them. Parents hid them. Hospitals probably had a wing just for clacker injuries. But we loved them. The brighter and sparklier the better. Some even had air bubbles inside like marbles that went rogue. They weren't just toys. They were training tools for pain tolerance, coordination, and ignoring adult warnings. Long before you could download an app or stream a 3D shooter, there was Pong, a home video game so simple it was almost zen. 2 white paddles, 1 white dot, a black screen, and endless, glorious blip, blip sounds. The Atari console that hosted Pong wasn't flashy. It had knobs instead of joysticks. It required real TV tuning, not HDMI cables. And yet it blew our minds. This was the future, and it lived right next to the lava lamp. You'd sit cross-legged on the floor, turn the knob, and send that dot bouncing back and forth like digital tennis. It was slow, repetitive, and totally addictive. You didn't need high scores. You just needed to not lose. And every once in a while, the dot would get caught in a glitch, bouncing endlessly in a corner. That was your break. Go grab a snack, come back, and the game would still be going. Pong wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. It was the moment pixels met fun. And it changed everything. If you grew up thinking sleeping meant staying, mostly still, you clearly didn't have a Waterbed. These squishy, sloshy beds were a 1970s status symbol. Part mattress, part novelty ride. Lying down on one felt like surrendering to the ocean. The bed would shift under your weight, ripple when you rolled over, and occasionally make gurgling sounds that reminded you there was an entire ecosystem under your sheets. For kids, it was magic. For adults, it was a chiropractor's nightmare. And let's not forget the heating system. Some waterbeds came with internal heaters to keep the bed warm in the winter. If you were lucky, it worked. If not, it felt like napping on a cold soup. Making the bed was an Olympic event. Fitted sheets didn't really fit. Corners popped loose, and you had to avoid puncturing the vinyl with anything sharp, unless you wanted to flood the bedroom, at 2 a.m. Still, for a brief, glorious moment, sleeping on a giant bag of water felt like the future. A wavy, unpredictable, oddly cozy future. In a world before reward points and online cashback, there were SSR&H green stamps. You didn't earn them with clicks, you earned them with groceries, gas, and patience. Cashiers would hand you a stack of green stamps with every purchase. Then you'd go home, peel them off the backing, and stick them into stamp books with a level of care usually reserved for fine art. Page after page, you filled those books with dreams. Toasters, blenders, maybe even a lawn chair if you saved enough. It wasn't instant gratification. It was a long game. But flipping through the redemption catalog was a family event. You circled items, made your case, and fantasized about finally trading in 10 full books for that Fondue set. Eventually, you'd walk into an S&H redemption center, clutching your stamp-filled bounty like a briefcase full of cash. And you'd walk out with a brand-new popcorn popper and a grin that lasted all week. Some candies melt, others crunch. But only one exploded. Inside your mouth, no less. Pop Rocks were less of a snack and more of a science experiment, gone deliciously right. Tear open the packet, pour the pebbles into your mouth, and wait. Instantly, they'd start fizzing, snapping, and cracking like fireworks against your tongue. It felt like eating lightning, and we loved it. Some kids swore if you mixed Pop Rocks with soda, you'd explode. Others dared you to chew with your mouth open so they could hear the show. Either way, Pop Rocks weren't just candy. They were conversation starters. They came in neon packets with flavors like strawberry, watermelon, and blue raspberry. And once you had them, you didn't need anything else for a while. You just sat there, eyes wide, mouth popping like a firecracker. They didn't last long, but neither did disco. And we're still talking about both. Before megaplexes and reclining seats, movie night meant piling into the car and heading to the drive-in theater. You didn't just go to see a film, you went to experience it from the back seat of a Buick, with a speaker hooked to your window. You'd pack snacks, blankets, and bug spray. The screen loomed large against the night sky, and sometimes, if you squinted, you could see the stars behind the spaceship chase scenes. If your parents were feeling wild, they let you stay in your pajamas. Some kids fell asleep halfway through, others watched the whole double feature while munching popcorn their parents smuggled in. The windows fogged, the sound crackled, and when the previews started, the whole lot buzzed with headlights flashing and engines idling. Sure, it wasn't always comfortable, but it was magic. Because watching a movie outdoors, surrounded by cars, crickets, and cousins, made everything feel a little more epic. In the 1970s, knowledge didn't come from Google. It came from a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman in a brown suit, holding the entire universe in 2 sample volumes. These guys had pitches. They'd knock politely, sit at your kitchen table, and unfold the dream. Your child, smarter, more successful, more worldly. All thanks to 26 leather-bound volumes of information. Parents nodded. Kids yawned. But eventually, the deal was made, and a few weeks later, giant boxes arrived with your shiny new Britannica set. Suddenly, your living room bookshelf looked like a library. Research projects covered. Questions about volcanoes or aardvarks solved. Dusting those things, a chore forever. And let's be honest, we mostly used them for the color photos and the transparent human anatomy overlays. They weren't just books, they were status. And for a while, they made your house feel smarter. Before memes and parodies went viral, online they lived on your lunchbox in the form of wacky packages. These sticker cards took everyday products and twisted them into hilarious, gross-out versions that made every kid laugh and every teacher sigh. Cap'n Crud, Levirus soap, Pall Mall cigarettes. They were bold, colorful, and completely inappropriate, which made them even better. You'd buy them in packs like trading cards, sniff the gum, and maybe chew it if it wasn't petrified, then carefully peel and stick them onto your schoolbooks, lockers, and trapper keepers. Some schools banned them. Some parents disapproved, but we loved them. They weren't just funny, they were subversive. Little jabs at consumer culture that made us feel clever and just a bit rebellious. If you had the whole collection, you were basically a comedy. king on the playground. The electric football game looked like the coolest toy ever until you turned it on. A metal field, plastic players, and a little motor that made the whole thing vibrate like it was having a nervous breakdown. You'd spend 20 minutes setting up the perfect play. Offensive line, quarterback, wide receivers, and then flip the switch. The players buzzed across the field, spinning, bumping, and mostly going nowhere. But once in a while one would actually head in the right direction, and the whole room would erupt. There was a learning curve, like how to bend the little metal tabs under the players to steer them. And it never worked the same way twice. But that unpredictability, that's what made it special. Because when a touchdown did happen, it felt like divine intervention. It wasn't about winning. It was about laughing, shouting, and arguing over whether the guy in blue actually crossed the goal line. Spoiler, he probably didn't. Forget salons. In the 70s, all you needed for a summer makeover was a bottle of Sunin. This lemony spray promised golden highlights with nothing but sunlight and a dream. You'd spritz it generously before heading outside, hoping to come back looking like a surfer. And sometimes, you did. But more often, your hair turned a shade of orange not found in nature. Didn't matter. It smelled great and felt rebellious, like controlling your own destiny, one mist at a time. Sun in wasn't just for girls either. Plenty of boys tried it too, hoping for that beachy look without the beach. And it usually came with a side of crunchy hair, dried out by peroxide and ambition. You'd stand in front of the mirror, tilting your head, trying to see the change. Was that lighter? Maybe? Probably? Either way, you were sure you looked cool. And that was all that mattered. Art class in the 1970s wasn't complete without scented markers, officially called smello pens. These brightly colored felt-tip markers didn't just color your paper. They filled the room with sugary, synthetic smells that hit like a candy store in your nose. There was cherry, grape, licorice, lemon, and that one weird brown one that might have been root beer. Kids would hoard their favorites, trade them like currency, and sometimes sniff them so much it gave them a headache. You didn't even have to draw. Just uncapping them was enough fun. You'd compare smells, rank them, and occasionally sneak a whiff during math class. Teachers hated them. We couldn't get enough. The caps always got lost. The ink dried up too fast. But for a few glorious minutes your notebook smelled like dessert, and that was worth every sticky finger. Before online wish lists and Amazon Prime, there was the Christmas catalog. Thick, glossy, and stuffed into your mailbox around October, it was the most anticipated reading material of the year. Sears, J.C. Penney, Montgomery Ward, each one 100 pages of possibility. You didn't just flip through it, you studied it, circled toys in red pen, dog-eared pages, made your case to your parents like a lawyer with a closing argument. That toy section? Legendary. Dolls, race cars, board games, and new tech like calculators and tape decks. It was a treasure map, a dream generator, and a time killer all in. 1. You'd lie on the carpet, stomach down, catalog spread out in front of you, and build your dream haul. Then maybe sneak back later, open it to the same page, and wish just a little harder. That catalog wasn't just paper. It was magic. And the holidays never really started until it arrived. If even one of these brought a memory rushing back, maybe the fizz of pop rocks or the rattle of a drive-in movie speaker, tell us in the comments what you remember most from the 70s. And if you want more memory lane marathons, check out our playlist, Things Every 80s Kid Lived Through. Tap into the nostalgia next door. The journey doesn't end here.